So here's our breaking news of this hour, the Great Escape. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Thank you so much for joining us. One of the largest mass evacuations in U.S. history underway tonight, right now. Millions of people running for their lives ahead of massive Hurricane Irma, now expected to strengthen to a Category 5 before slamming Florida with a direct hit on Sunday. Irma, which has sustained winds of 155 miles an hour, has left a trail of destruction and death through the Caribbean as it takes aim right at South Florida. The National Weather Service tweeting this ominous warning, saying nowhere in the Florida Keys will be safe. Nowhere in the Florida Keys will be safe. And Florida's governor warning anyone who is still not taking this storm seriously, we can't save you when the storm starts. We're waiting a new forecast to come right at the top of the hour in just moments, so we came to you a little bit early so we can get that on as soon as we get it. I want to get right to CNN's Derek Van Dam, though, live for us in Miami. So, Derek, take us to the ground. You're a meteorologist as well. What makes this storm so dangerous? What are some of the specific threats? What are you seeing? I know that's a lot, but take us through it.
All right, so Don, we are on Ocean Drive in the South Beach of Miami, and normally on any given night, especially in the summer, especially on a Friday evening, this street would be teemed with cars and pedestrians. But as you can see, very little activity with the exception of one bar, one lonely restaurant where they just ended up kicking out the last few people that decided to stay and have that last final beer. Here it is behind me. And we're talking about threats. I would imagine that this particular area, just because we are so close to the sea, 5 to 10 foot inundation from storm surge, not out of the question. We've got a long fetch of wind that's going to push up the ocean currents here over the next 24 to 48 hours. We know that's a threat. Aside from storm surge, we know winds are going to be a threat here as well, kicking up debris, making it significantly difficult to just be standing within this area. So people have listened to the evacuation orders, and they have really heeded the call, with the exception of a few stragglers that have decided to stay behind. You can see them just exiting the bar behind me, Don.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, Derek, stand by. We'll get back to you, but I need to get to our breaking news real quick. A new forecast just in for Hurricane Irma as Florida braces for a direct hit. CNN's Allison Chinchar live for us in the CNN Weather Center. Take it away, Allison. What do you have?
It is now back to a Category 5 storm. Winds have increased to 160 miles per hour. We anticipated it would get back up to a Category 5, but it has strengthened quickly. We're looking at wind gusts now 195 miles per hour. It is skirting so close to Cuba. In fact, it may end up being over land. We may actually have an official landfall over Cuba, if not right now, certainly within the next hour. But the storm, the majority of it is still over open water, and that's what has allowed it over the last couple of hours to intensify. So here's the thing. We expect it to be a Category 5 as it crosses over the Florida Keys, and then for the main peninsula of Florida, likely weaken slightly down to a Category 4. But again, I want to emphasize, we're talking the difference of maybe perhaps 5 miles per hour. So don't necessarily focus on whether it's a Category 4 or a 5 over the peninsula. Focus on the winds itself, because they are going to remain strong, even if you're talking a high-end Category 4 versus a low-end Category 5. We've also now seen the expansion of hurricane watches and warnings. They are now starting to push a little bit further north. We expected them to do this, and we expect them to continue to push further north as we get closer to landfall itself. The timing of landfall, especially say around the Key West region, likely between 4 and 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. Now, long before then, you're going to start to see some of those outer bands begin to push some very heavy showers and even some thunderstorms into portions of southern Florida, and you'll start to see some of that storm surge begin to build. At its peak, storm surge from West Palm Beach down to Key West is expected to be 5 to 10 feet. We're talking 8 to 12 feet from Naples stretching down towards Key West. Even as far north, say, as Tampa, Don, we're talking 3 to 5 feet. So again, we knew the storm would intensify a little bit more. It has already done so. So again, I know you've mentioned this many times. So many people have mentioned this. get out of Florida. If you can, get out. You have very little time left, but there is still some time left.
All right, Allison, I want you to stand by because I've got both of my meteorologists here. I've got Derek Van Dam, who is on the ground for us in Florida. I also have Allison, who's in the CNN Weather Center. So, Derek, looking at these conditions now, you heard the new forecast from that Allison just gave. It is now a Category 5 again as it heads towards Florida. So, give us some of the specific threats. How dangerous is this to where you are right now?
Well, I'm glad that Allison highlighted that we're splitting hairs here between a Category 4 and a Category 5. Still ominous, though, that it's now been upgraded. Nonetheless, some of the calculations that we were making just showing how wide of an expanse the tropical storm force winds actually are. They extend from the center of the storm all the way out to 70 miles. So in diameter, that's 140 miles. At its widest, the Florida Peninsula is 140 miles. So with, at the very least, a landfalling hurricane on the southern tip of Florida will impact from west coast to east coast, because the center of the storm all the way to the outer edges of the storm still will pack winds easily in excess of 58 miles per hour. The closer you get to the center of the storm, obviously they go up. It's where the eye wall goes. That is the most crucial aspect. That is where you find the strongest winds. And now that it's been upgraded to a Category 5, anything over 155 miles per hour will easily cause catastrophic damage wherever it does indeed make landfall.
And so, Allison, back to you. And we keep talking about, well, the European model's got it this way, west a little bit, and east a little bit. And I cannot stress, and I think that you'll agree with me, as I've been watching all day and then just really sort of absorbing this, Florida is just going to get hit. It just depends on where it's going, and still, it doesn't matter. You need to get out. It's going to have a very big impact, especially on the lower part of that state.
That's right, and especially now because the models have really come together. You know, days ago when we were talking about, well, this model goes here and this model goes here, now they've really come into alignment. At this point, Florida is going to get hit. It's semantics, as Derek pointed out, when you talk about exactly what the wind strength will be or exactly where the landfall location will be. But because of the size of this storm, you're going to see huge impacts on both the East Coast and the West Coast. Same with winds, same with storm surge, and same thing even with rainfall, because that's even going to be widespread, 6 to 10 inches. Not to mention you'll have some areas that could pick up at least a foot of rain, especially as those outer bands really begin to develop and get closer.
All right, I want you both to stand by, Derek and also Allison, and I may get back to you in just moments. We just got the new forecast. Our meteorologist, Allison Chinchar, reporting now that this hurricane is now back up to Irma, a Category 5. Miguel Marquez is in Fort Lauderdale for us this evening. Miguel, people need to heed these warnings all over the state.
Yeah, I think everybody who has decided to heed those warnings is gone. Those that haven't are going to stay in. This is downtown Fort Lauderdale, Friday night. This place should be busy. Instead, it's pretty much a ghost town. We even saw a couple of people who are locals here walking by, and they're a little shocked by how dead it is. They just believe that they can make it through this storm, that it's not going to come this far over, that they're not going to feel the brunt of it. But I will say that millions of people are on the move, either into shelters or just out of the state, from Florida through Georgia and into the Carolinas, because this storm is clearly going up in that direction. We were out in Lake Okeechobee today in far west Palm Beach County. It's a very vulnerable community out there, just south of the lake, the area immediately south of there. They are vulnerable to not only the storm itself, but possibly to the levees failing on the lake and completely inundating their towns with water, completely wiping them off the face of the earth. So they had to mount an escape or an evacuation, where they went to shelters or evacuation centers in the towns, and then they were bused 40 or 50 miles away. Very difficult to do for a rural immigrant, Creole-speaking, agricultural community there, but people are getting on those buses. They are getting out of that area. For the most part, people are listening to those orders, but a lot of people are staying. We did see a lot of gas stations tonight that are open. There's no lines. There is gas. So clearly, most people have left, but there is still a pretty hardcore contingent that's still here. Don?
All right, thank you, Miguel. I need to go to Alex Marquardt now. He is live for us, also in Fort Lauderdale. Alex, appreciate you joining us. You were speaking with the mayor of Fort Lauderdale earlier. What did he tell you?
Well, we were. Well, he was confident overall in terms of the preparedness, but what he's scared of is the storm surge. We're just 25 miles north of Miami. They're expecting a similar surge to what that city will see, so somewhere between 5 and 10 feet. And it's not just the surge. It is a surge that is fueled by these high winds and a possible high tide. I did speak with the mayor, Jack Seiler, earlier this afternoon. Here's what he had to say.
When you look at this storm, if you end up pushing all that water that came across the Atlantic with this storm, and you push it up on our shores, and you combine that, if we're unlucky to be at a high tide, especially during the seasonal high tide season, and then combine that with a little rain that's going to be there anyway, that precipitation, then the last element, the east wind pushing that water on the surface, those factors could all lead to a serious water issue here in the city of Fort Lauderdale.
So the mayor says that they are as ready as they possibly can be, but at the same time, every official you speak to would like to see people get out as soon and as quickly as they possibly can. Don?
So Alex, you're in a mandatory evacuation order zone, right? Are people heeding it? What do you think?
Well, you can see these cars going behind me, so there's still some activity out here tonight. It has gone down significantly since earlier in the day. There are far fewer people out here tonight. If you look around the big condo buildings tonight, there are very few lights in them. But I have to say there was a surprising number of people out and about today here on the beach at a nearby bar that was absolutely packed until just a few hours ago. The people who we spoke with said they were not living in this evacuation zone. They're living farther deeper into the city where Miguel is, so they feel a lot more comfortable and say that they have what they need to ride out this storm. They've got the supplies, they've got strong homes, they've boarded up their homes, they have hurricane shutters, so there is a lot of confidence. But as we mentioned, no one from the governor on down would like to see any of these residents stick around. Don?
All right, Alex, thank you very much. Joining me now on the phone is Mayor Philip Stoddard of South Miami. Mayor, so glad that you could join us this evening. What's the latest on the evacuations? That's what everyone is concerned about. Are people heeding these evacuations? What's the latest?
Well, a lot of people have gotten out of town. I would guess we have probably half the usual population here at the moment. My biggest concern is that a lot of people have gone over to the west side of Florida because the initial center of the cone was coming up the east side of the peninsula, so people went over to the west side, and looks like they're in even greater danger over there now than they were when they were here.
Yeah. So
worry about that.
Yeah, but I mean the thing is that the people have been told to move to higher ground, or even to, if they could get out of the state of Florida altogether. You don't agree with that?
Well, no, I do, and a lot of people have gotten out of state. But today the airport's closed. A lot of flights were canceled. People who thought they had things figured out discovered they didn't. There's folks who had their hotel reservations canceled who got stuck. It's the problem of living way down a peninsula. There's not that many roads out. I'm looking right now at the traffic online from Orlando north up the center of the state to Atlanta. It's pretty heavy traffic. But right now, people over in Tampa St. Pete could cross the state over to the east side and come up 95, and the traffic's pretty clear. And that might be the smartest thing for people from Naples and up to Tampa to do, is get off the west coast of Florida, come out to the east side and head northwards.
Yeah. The governor is calling for 1,000 nurses to volunteer at special needs shelters. Do you feel your shelters are already adequately staffed?
Well, I haven't been over to the shelters. I've been working around South Miami today, but the shelters are now at capacity. They've been opening new shelters as fast as they can. But they did the evacuation order not based on the shelter capacity, but based on the need to get people out of harm's way. And so now they're playing catch-up, creating the shelters and opening new ones as fast as they can.
How many people would you say are planning to ride this thing out at home against the guidelines from officials? We've spoken to some of them this evening. Our reporters and anchors have been out interviewing some of them. They said that they're going to ride it out, even some people in the Keys.
Yeah, well, I guess about a third of the folks are probably going to ride it out, and the other 2/3 have probably cleared out.
Yeah. What about? And whether
go on. Staying staying, may not be the worst thing if you have a particularly sturdy house and if you're not going to see serious storm surge. So people have to look at their own situation. There's, you can't give generic advice to people saying, hey, it might be okay to stay, when you know that for many of them it would not be.
Yeah, but that also depends on where you are, and again, no one really knows exactly where. We know it's going to hit Florida, but exactly where it's going to hit. But you also have to look at the storm surge on top of that, Mayor, and then you look at the wave height on top of that. I mean, it's just a whole cacophony.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And when you're against the coast, you have to assume, you have to make your plans for a worst case scenario. And, there are people who are in general evacuation zones who are higher than storm surge will reach them. And it's probably better for them to stay put if they've got a strong enough house to withstand the wind fields, because, we are limited on shelter space. And so you don't want people going and taking up the shelters unnecessarily, because we've got folks who still need to get in.
Mayor Philip Sauter, thank you so much.
You bet.
I appreciate it. When we come